2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The top story from the GB newsroom: in a scathing letter following her sacking as Home Secretary yesterday, Suella Braverman has accused the Prime Minister today of having manifestly and repeatedly failed to deliver on key government policies. In a letter posted on social media this afternoon, Mr Braverman accused Rishi Sunak of betraying his promise to do whatever it takes to stop the small boat crossings and by failing to override human rights concerns about the Rwanda plan. She also urged the Prime Minister to change course urgently, accusing him of leading the Conservatives to record election defeats. Shadow Minister for International Development Lisa Nandy said the British public deserve better.
Suella Braverman's letter is just the latest instalment in a Tory psychodrama that's been playing out over the last 13 years, holding the rest of the country to ransom while the Tories fight among themselves. This reshuffle was meant to be the moment when Rishi Sunak reset his leadership, when he signalled to the country that he stands for change. But with the return of David Cameron and the ongoing row with Suella Braverman, I think all he's served to do is just show that this is a Tory government that is out of ideas, out of energy.
Lisa Nandy there. Well, the government's announced today sanctions will be put against 4 Hamas leaders in the UK and 2 of the terror group's financiers. It's actually one of David Cameron's first moves as Foreign Secretary. He took up the post yesterday. They'll be made subject to travel bans, asset freezes and arms embargoes that prohibit the sale of weapons to any of those individuals. The government's considering making the chickenpox vaccine available on the NHS following a recommendation by scientists. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation says the jab should be given to youngsters in 2 doses when they're 12 months and 18 months old. It says data from other countries suggests the vaccine would dramatically reduce circulating cases of chickenpox and prevent the most severe cases in children. Now, the Liverpool football striker Luis Diaz has had an emotional reunion with his father in Colombia after the 58-year-old football coach was kidnapped early this month. In a post on social media this evening, the Colombia Football Federation published pictures of the family's reunion showing Diaz hugging and kissing his tearful father, who at one point had been held at gunpoint. Diaz's parents were snatched off the street in a case which shocked both British and Colombian fans, with the kidnappers demanding demanding a ransom. Diaz's mum was freed almost immediately, but Diaz's dad was held for 12 days before being released to UN and church officials. The player missed 2 of Liverpool's matches whilst his father was being held, but came off the bench for a game and scored against Luton on November the 5th. And lastly, His Majesty the King has been celebrating his birthday today, his 75th birthday, and he launched an initiative to support charities feeding families with unwanted films. And they had a little surprise for him as well.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
King Charles treated to a rendition of Happy Birthday from the Oxfordshire community, where he launched the Coronation Food Project alongside Queen Camilla. Then, early this evening, the monarch also hosted a reception for 400 nurses and midwives at Buckingham Palace to highlight the work done over the decades as the NHS celebrates its 75th anniversary. And a very happy birthday from us all at GB News, Your Majesty. Across the UK on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker, this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight to go through Wednesday's top stories, we have 2 top comedians, Josh Howie and Leo Kirst. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Excellent. All right, well, let's crack on. None of this fake banter. Just none of us in the mood for it. It's November. Daily Mail to kick us off. He gave me Manilows. No, sorry, that's not the main headline. We had a deal and you broke it, Suella tells PM, looking tousled and bedheaded there in their front page photograph. iNews, revenge served hot. And inflation coming down. Mirror, Tories are revolting. That's still with Suella. The Times, PM lied to me and betrayed Britain. There is the woman scorned Express. War is declared. Suella accuses Rishi of betraying the nation. And finally, the Daily Star break ranks as ever. Tories in a tiz. Handbagged. Well, it's the same story, but a different graphic. That's the front pages. So, in reality, we have very little choice about which story to deal with first, second and third, Josh.
But we do have a choice of the photos.
OK, which one are you going with?
We're going to go with, the Mail, with her sort of, like you say, her sort of tousled hair.
A little bit of bare shoulder.
Yes, we had a deal and you broke it, Suella tells PM. Rishi hits back and says he believes in actions, not words, which is actually what she says in the letter. You don't do any actions and words. So pretty much the opposite of it. She's timed it to come out, so because today, depending on when you're watching this, tomorrow, today, is going to be the results of the Supreme Court, whether Rwanda can go ahead. So she wanted that to have the maximum impact. And it's pretty damning. And she's basically saying that he's not getting on with... And it turns out they had, like, a private agreement of sort of a Blair Brownie type deal.
It was quite a specific letter as well, wasn't it? It wasn't just, like, throwing insults around. She made some quite specific accusations, and specifically, as you say, about the Supreme Court, which she doesn't feel that they've gone in well-armoured and prepared,
and have no
they feel
plan B
vulnerable. No, exactly,
she says he never had any intention of taking the action required to stop the boats, which you do sort of get the impression that he didn't, because he hasn't in any way. He hasn't done anything. None of the plans have actually come to fruition. The best he's done is, like, rented a barge and put it off the south coast.
Well, the accusation, I suppose, and she's very, very nearly made it explicit, is that this whole Rwanda thing was supposed to be a kind of a dramatic... like a storm, like a headline-grabbing thing, which he knew would never come off, as if he'd almost intended it to be just a completely farrago, because he was not willing to take the action to deal with the ECHR.
And it seems unfair that she's been fired for telling the truth. I mean, I understand politicians have to play politics, but she's got convictions, and she not police convictions, but she criticised the Met Police, ironically, saying that they've got a 2-tier policing system, which is obvious to anybody watching the policing of the marches, you've got people freely chanting anti-Semitic, genocidal chants, and some of them are being started by Met Police employees, Met Police advisors.
We felt it for, well, as long as this programme has been running, certainly over 2 years now. It's been a regular complaint that the Met Police are not fit for purpose, that the police seem to be one moment... I think Nick refers to it as a narco-tyranny, which is, I think, an American sort of big concept whereby, on the one hand, you have a police force which allows open shoplifting to go ahead and rioting and things get burnt down, and yet also you get visited for posting an unpleasant Facebook.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a shame. I was just warming to her.
Yeah.
Don't worry, she'll be a leader soon. So
Well, I do wonder now at this point, I mean, I don't think she will be the leader of the Tory party in exile. I don't think she's quite, but I do wonder whether she might join one of the breakaway parties. I mean, she could very easily elevate the Esteem and, was it Reform?
Yep.
Is one of them, isn't it? Is that a major one? I wonder whether they'd have a Suella-sized hole.
Yeah, although she might not want to, given that you had a bit of trouble remembering...
That is no sign of anything these days.
Juggernaut.
What have we got? Have any of the other papers got anything else to add to any of it?
No, well, you've got the Times.
Yeah, what have you got in the Times there?
Yeah, so she says the Prime Minister lied to me and betrayed Britain, which is the essence of the letter. I mean, she really does. She goes all out. There's not, I mean, like, they'll be scraping Rishi off the ground with a shovel.
And she does specifically say, and again, I think there's some truth to it. I mean, with the police thing, I felt, at the very least, she was identifying something that a huge part of the nation shared, that suspicion, and it needed addressing. But also, she addresses the 2019 majority. Boris Johnson won on a raft of policies, and some very, very specific sentiments were underpinning those. And again, Rishi has not been legitimately elected, really. I mean, it's a second and third order effect, isn't it? His premiership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Boris was defenestrated and they had the internal election to get the next person, that wasn't legitimate. But then even the person they picked from that didn't get to be Prime Minister, or they got a couple of weeks and they managed to make some things happen in the background.
But it's damning that her criticism of he's just not getting, as you say, stuff done. And really, if they have any chance, it's about taking bold action. And he's just trying to make everybody happy. He's going back to the past with Cameron.
Exactly.
It's like, and he's lost these by-elections by massive, So it's.
I don't think it's going to win him any seats. I mean, just pure. I'm no expert, but pure politics, rail politic or whatever. The number of people who are going to be persuaded that they're safe with Rishi because he's got David Cameron, because we're going back to a pre-Brexit sort of version of the party. They are minimal compared to the number who are just going to say a plague on both your houses and are exit stage right. And either go and support reform or just stay at home, to be honest. When you have an election in the middle of November, it's not very difficult to persuade people.
It's not like he inspires passion.
No, exactly.
He seems to be playing safe. He seems to be acting like Keir Starmer, just when he's in completely the wrong position. To have any chance of winning the next election, he needs to, present some pretty radical change.
They are basically both of them fighting over the deck chair attendant, aren't they, on the deck of the Titanic? What have you got in the eye?
There is something else in the Times.
So there's the NHS chief has pledged end of cervical cancer cases. So they're going to do this by replacing women with trans men. So they're going to do with cervices altogether. But it's crazy. I mean, cervical cancer affects over 3,000 women a year and kills 850 women a year, and it's been brought down 87% thanks to this vaccine against HPV, which as well as letting you drive lorries, it causes some sort of human papilloma virus and causes cervical cancer.
I hadn't heard of it, I must admit, but obviously that is tremendously good news. I mean, it is extraordinary, actually, the medical advances that go on under the radar, because we are very focused, obviously, on this programme and elsewhere on bad news, but, obviously fewer and fewer people die of such things.
This is long-term planning as well, so you're seeing the fruitions of this, of giving 8-year-old girls the vaccine, and you are now seeing what's happening.
It's extraordinary things that can be treated by vaccines, like malaria is obviously the most headline result one, which yes, exactly. But only, within only 20 or 30 years years ago, it was one of those eye-rolling moments, apparently, among med students. Somebody would always say, why can't we have a vaccine for malaria? And they go, oh, I have to go through this again. It simply isn't possible. And now it is.
Yeah.
Extraordinary. So, well, yes, can we go on to the eye now?
The eye,
and,
obviously,
graphic.
that's the main thing. Revenge served hot. They're definitely getting less flattering, these photos of her. But the big news, more good news, actually. Inflation is set for seismic fall today or tomorrow, whenever you're reading this, below 5%. So it's going down from like 6.7 to 4.7. That's a pretty big drop.
Yeah.
But the eye is very at pains to point out that it had nothing to do with Sunak.
Yeah.
So you can take no responsibility whatsoever. It's one of his 5 pledges, of course, was to halve the inflation.
Yeah.
But it is good news. But then we've seen massive wage inflation in terms of 7.7% over the last few months.
Yeah.
But then there was arguably a course correction and things needed.
One of those occasions when I really wished I'd been in a unionised, ideally public sector kind of profession. But yes, I mean, it's still high, 5%. Throughout most of my adult life, it's been sort of 2 or 3% the last 20 years, anyway.
Yeah, we've had a couple of decades of nice, non-inflationary constant expansion, which is great. But I mean, it's funny, you see people on the. In fact, I saw somebody on GB News saying, "Oh, but prices are still higher than they were," and it's like, yeah, we're not going to get deflation.
Yeah, and we don't want it either.
Yeah, we don't want that.
No, if it can stabilise around 2 or 3, that'd be all right.
To get cheaper.
Well, there's always Poland. Finally, the metro, Leo.
So this is the ice hockey death. There's been an arrest. The man who
the skates up.
The other man died.
Yeah.
I don't know if obviously it's a live investigation now, so I've got to be careful how I refer to this. But if you've seen the video, I mean, he sort of spins round, his blade goes up and slices open the other guy's throat. It's horrific.
Yeah.
And I assumed it was in Canada or something like that, but apparently they've got ice hockey here now. But yeah, then they've unearthed a video of an old incident with the same kind of movement. So, I mean, I guess for the police to get to this stage of arresting him for manslaughter, there's obviously some suspicion that it's not accidental.
Well, there was a lot of speculation at the time, but as you say, we should probably be careful about that since it is now going to court. But as you say, horrific to watch, really sickening. Well, I think that'll do us for the front pages. We are going to a break now. Afterwards, we have Keir's cracking the whip. We have Brand at the Beeb and chickenpox parties. So last year. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So, on the other side of the house, Leo, the Express would have us believe that Keir's ship is every bit as prone to mutiny as Sunak's.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the Israel crisis that's caused ructions for him. So Keir Starmer is to sack every front-bench rebel over the Gaza ceasefire and brutal Labour purge. So the Labour leader is going to be poised to fire at least 10 shadow ministers who support a ceasefire in Gaza. I mean, it's weird. It looks like Keir's finally found his cojones. He can never pick a side. I mean, this is a guy who, he can't order at McDonald's. It takes him about 5 hours, then he just orders whatever the person in front of him has ordered. But on Israel versus Hamas, he's come out, firmly on the side of Israel, on the side of civilization, basically.
Which is potentially not necessarily a vote loser for him, but it is obviously the more problematic in terms of his.
Well, it's a vote loser for certainly some of the legacy of the party from the Corbyn years.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2019, 85% of British Muslims voted Labour. It's a huge. So you don't see that level of bias amongst any other religion. Whereas now, he's sort of rejecting that side of things. And the Muslim vote has been very important to Labour. It's replaced the white working class vote in northern towns. Yeah. But this is now an incredibly divisive issue. They've got, obviously a lot of Muslims, a lot of woke leftists who support Hamas, or or certainly side or equivocate with Hamas. But I think it'll make Labour much more palatable to the sort of middle Englanders that Keir needs to win over to win the election.
I mean, assuming it is a political calculation rather than a firm moral principle, and I'm quite willing to assume that, I think it's probably correct.
No, I think someone's worked out the numbers and realised that if he's seen to be... Remember when, Corbyn said, let's send the sample to Russia to see what if they say it's that was that people say it was anti-Semitism that brought down Corbyn. It wasn't at all. It was that moment when people saw what they could see clearly with their own eyes and go, wait a minute, this guy is an idiot. And obviously Keir Starmer's learned from those things. He has actually been tough. He's been tough on anti-Semitism. He's already kicked out Corbyn. Any times that they try to, the left or the far left of his party have acted up, he's said to them, look, that you signed this letter, you're gone. And he's done that before. Now, he hasn't actually fired anybody yet, but this is because the vote's going to come through and the SNP are proposing a vote for the King's speech, but he'll follow through, no doubt, because, as you say, they have worked out the numbers, I'm sure, and he will absolutely alienate much more of Middle England than the 4 million Muslims.
I mean, you follow Labour more closely. Do you have any particular people in mind that you think he's thinking of? I wouldn't be able to name names, but people who are
he's got rid of a lot of the worst people already, but
10 names on the front bench who he genuinely thinks.
But I think they're much more like the second tier people anyway, and also they were there arguably to appease the left of the party.
Yes,
in a way, get rid of them, and I think it's a good thing.
Maybe we'll get Suella in.
Over at the Times, Josh, it's only a matter of time before Steve Coogan is invited to another casting session at the Beeb.
Oh gosh, yeah. Russell Brand, BBC investigates 5 complaints. So this was in the good old days before Hamas went and murdered 1,200 Israelis in despicable ways. Remember Russell Brand, the whole thing?
Yeah.
So
it was a big story.
It was a big story back in those halcyon days. 2 complaints have been made more since. So obviously it was a huge deal. Every front page, week or so. We were sort of convinced that there was going to be this sort of avalanche of complaints coming
pulled away the struts that were holding it up.
Yeah, absolutely. All these people come forward, and actually, at the BBC anyway, it turns out 2 complaints have come forward. They've got 5 complaints total they're investigating. 2 of them historical. One was about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And now 2 new ones have come in. They're not sexually related in any way. They're just about his behaviour.
Wow.
So I'm just saying you might have expected more if... I'm not saying
it's
he
not like
behaved
a Savile-esque avalanche.
No, or even the second order after Savile against all the other DJs and sports presenters.
Yeah. Now that's not to say that his behaviour. I agree with his behaviour, and these ones that these other things that have come forward before have been dealt with in a court of law or anything like that.
No.
But I'm just saying that it seemed like there was going to be this big hoo-ha, and it has not materialised.
Yeah, and some of the complaints, like somebody complained that he asked her for sex and she felt uncomfortable, and that's terrible. But that's how we get sex. You got to be proactive about it. You've got to get out there and start asking some of those tough questions.
Well, it certainly was his style, wasn't it? I think anyone who came within 100 yards of him must have been aware that was kind of how he operated. You know, which is again, obviously, not to excuse any behaviour that went on that did transgress legally, but as you say, as a kind of a brash peacock of a kind of individual,
that was his shtick. I mean, I'm not but then this is his. One of the people here, they're saying he made his explicit and misogynistic shows. How were they allowed to be broadcast? That's what they're looking into, and you're going, that's ridiculous. This is 2008 or whatever. It was a different time. It's like saying, how did Benny Hill? How would they have done Benny Hill?
It wasn't the 70s. It was 2008.
No, I know, but it was
not that long ago.
It was lad culture.
I remember listening to Russell Brand on, I think it was Radio 2. He used to have his show on. Now, quite often driving to a gig on a Saturday night, it was funny enough, and then occasionally you kind of go, well, that's a bit strong for Radio 2. I do remember thinking, not like this is a fair, I shall write in. I remember him having David Icke on a couple of times and thinking that was a bit odd for Radio 2, but I think he regarded him as more like a Uri Geller character rather than
he was also looking for his future career.
But Tim Davie, I think, is named in this story, who is now the Director General. He seems to have heard Russell Brand for the first time. He's saying, I listened back and was like, oh, it's a ball. OK. Telegraph now, Leo. Wes Streeting is set to abolish the NHS, by the sound of it.
So, league tables for the NHS under Labour's reform or bust plan.
That'll be bust, then.
I mean, that would continue the trajectory. So, Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, will promise far more transparency about poor performance and no more turning a blind eye to failure. Just with the NHS, though, the rest of the public sector can carry on failing. But yes, they're going to sort of measure the performance. But this means the hospital trusts, the hospitals will be marking their own homework and measuring things, and they can, the statistics can be fudged. And also, it's not as if it'll lead to any market pressures. Like people won't be choosing a different hospital. It's like you're not, generally.
There is some sort of team sent in or something, is it?
Yes, they send in a team, but that team's sent in by the Labour Party, so it could make it worse.
Well, I don't know if that's true. It's going to be like Ofstedy, I imagine.
Oh, they'd be like Troubleshooter.
I think this is the Ofsted. Look at the amazing state of the British education system now. Ofsted have done a sterling job. Can't wait till they do the hospitals.
The point is, I don't mind paying taxes or paying more taxes. The point is, I assume from what we've talked about in the past, you just want to make sure you get good value for money.
Yeah.
And all the money comes back to me in some way.
Well, it's a funny thing with the NHS, though. I know traditionally we all know the idea that it's the unofficial religion of our NHS, and we clap the nurses and all that. But I have sensed a real change since the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think people feel it's not fit for purpose and needs a really radical.
And as they're putting a lot more money into it, and then we are not seeing the improvements that we need.
Yeah.
I think he's coming out strong. He's coming out fighting. He's gonna face them down. I think this is a really good idea. It's going to show some level of accountability, and also they're going to be judged. The things that they're judging on, like waiting times and whatnot, which we haven't hit the waiting times that we used to have for about 10 years, like 4 hours or whatever. Something happened about 10, 13 years ago. And one thing I think is really encouraging, efforts to prevent ill health is something they're going to be judged on. And that economically pays out a lot more in the long run.
Although I don't know that I like living in that society. It does work, preventative medicine and nudge campaigns and one kind or another, but it is always that sort of slightly clammy feeling that people are tutting at you when you select your...
But it sort of makes it more fun, knocking back that brandy, knowing that you...
They definitely need better bacon sandwiches. That's on the basis of the Royal Sussex and the Haywards Heath. I will tell you one thing. At the age of 58, I go to the hospital and to the doctors quite a lot more in the last few years than I used to. I think there does come a point in your life when certain conditions start cascading and this thing leads to that thing, you suddenly notice it picks up and it enters your consciousness. I think in your 20s, 30s, 40s even, you barely think about it from one day to the next.
And your big thing so far has been bacon sandwiches.
Bacon sandwiches and, long queues and and not happy. Telegraph now, Josh. Health officials are party poopers. Chickenpox.
Chickenpox. I see. Chickenpox vaccine to be offered to all babies and toddlers. This sort of relates to one of the front page stories, but less sexual. And it's an interesting thing that all the stories about the pandemic have been that it led to these increases in literacy and various other factors, truancy and whatnot. This is slightly a good story in that it cut down on chickenpox because the kids weren't exposed to each other, and they want to kind of exploit that by pushing through this vaccine, which has already been implemented for the last few decades in America and Canada and various other places, possibly even wiping it out for good, because it does get serious, not for a minority of kids, but also even young adults can get it.
Well, the worry is, because the reason kids used to go to chickenpox parties and get it is because it's fairly harmless, if tiresome, when you're young, but when you're older... It's a great party, but when you're older, you get it, and it can give you shingles, I think, can't it? Which is a lot nastier, I believe.
You want a slate roof.
Yeah, hey?
You want a slate roof.
Shingles.
Yeah, they already had this vaccine. Why weren't they giving it to kids before?
I know it's a slightly... Well, maybe it's an administrative thing. Maybe they need to be older. But I think the point is not enough kids have got it anymore for parties to be viable.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like what was it? Glandular fever. Do you remember that one, which used to go around at parties just before exam time?
But they'll say that there's a lot less, obviously, immunity because there is a larger pool of people who don't have it. So it could suddenly go crazy.
Oh, right, yeah.
That's true. Well, we'll see. I remember it well, the smell of Caladril. Bleak news now from Deliveroo, Leo, and it's not just the pizza that's late.
Yes, this is child labour in the UK. So children rent food delivery apps to work illegally. So children as young as 15 are working as delivery app riders thanks to black market trade in app accounts. So this is an investigation by the BBC. So Just Eat, Deliveroo and Uber Eats, they allow delivery drivers to lend out their accounts. If you've got an account to ride and deliver food, and obviously then when you get your account, they check that you're over 18 and all the rest of it. But no, you can then just lend your account out, and they leave it up to the riders to make sure that they're doing it ethically, which is a terrible idea. Because this, I mean, the kid here was 17. He was a teenager, Leo. He died on a borrowed motorcycle while working for the app. He was a total striver. Sounds like a great kid. He wanted to be a millionaire, according to his stepfather, and whatever it took, he just wanted to earn money and hustle. So, a great kid would have been a great asset to the country, would have grown up to be a brilliant guy, and sadly his life's been cut short. That
is horrible, because obviously, Deliveroo drivers or riders or whatever they're called, they do cut corners. I've actually had a couple of very close calls with them, where they're trying to undertake you, in the traffic and that kind of thing, because they can make an extra couple of quid that way, can't they?
I mean, all I'd say is to add to that, it's not that these apps have let them or encouraging it or anything like that. They just haven't got the limitations they need to stop it. And now, obviously, hopefully, they will.
Funnily enough, I know somebody who made a lot of money on the Deliveroo software over the last few years. I will have a word and see whether he can't get his head around that. That's right. Part 2 is done. Part 3, fatherless criminals, childless fathers and supersonic sex pests. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Team mess.
Welcome back to Headliner. So, Leo, we have the Telegraph now, and according to a prison reformer, even our woeful attempts at fatherhood are better than nothing.
So yeah, their fears fatherlessness is fueling crime. So family breakdown leads to higher levels of offending and antisocial behaviour, says prison reformer Lord Farmer. I'm guessing his ancestors were farmers at some point.
Yeah, big farmer.
But yeah, there's research that shows 75% of young offenders did not grow up with both parents.
I don't think this is controversial, is it? This has been known for a long time. It's the single most strongest correlation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's common sense as well. I mean, this is the sort of liberalisation of the 60s, where people could get divorced and all the rest of it. It worked out great for middle class people because then you're free to pursue the life that you wanted. But for other people, it wasn't so great because the family structures break down, all the bonds, the sort of cement of the community that holds people together went away. And the stats are pretty Pretty stark, yeah. So fatherless children are 8 times more likely to be on the at-risk register and 50 times more likely to die of an inflicted injury than those living with 2 biological parents. Wow. I was raised by a single mum, and I just sniffed a bit of glue. But
well, they are obviously. I mean, this is a tricky issue to discuss without being without treading on a landmine, because obviously single women who raise kids on their own are heroes for doing so, to be encouraged to feel that they're supported. You've got to be able to discuss it without putting any blame.
Some of them are just impossible to live with.
Yes, of course, but you've got to discuss it without putting any blame on the women. It's the men. It's a bit like when you do a stand-up gig. Have you ever done like a tour date and it's half empty and you're angry about it, but you can't complain. You end up complaining to the people who have come. Do you know what I mean? It's like
that's all I've done. But yeah, exactly as Leo said. These statistics are incredible. 50 times more likely to die of an injury.
Yeah.
That's how I keep my wife around. I'm like, if you leave me, the kids are going to be 50 times more likely. But there's another really interesting statistic about people who receive visits from family members whilst they're in prison are 39% less likely to reoffend than the people who don't. And it's actually the biggest. Rather, everyone says, give them some education in jail or stop drug treatment programs and whatnot. Those only have an impact of 9%, 19%. This is a huge impact. So it seems
a continuing relationship
with family members coming in, and you think, and I don't know if they already do this, but surely it makes economic sense to pay for family members, give them free travel, free bus passes, whatever it is, to be able to visit their relatives in jail if it has such a big impact.
It's one of those things where that'd be the cart leading the horse. So it's the fact that the family members want to go that is the signal that they're going to come out and they're being cared. Somebody cares about them. If you bribe people to turn up and look bored, it's going to.
I'm speaking from personal experience.
It is interesting that it is one of the major talking points among that phenomenon that you get in America, the black conservative, you know, like Thomas Sowell being the godfather of it all, but there's another, Glenn Lurie and so on. They emphasise again and again that the welfare state essentially was a disaster for the black community, and obviously young black men massively overrepresented in correctional facilities in America, but it correlates even more closely with fatherlessness as well. And I just think it is, you know, it's an extraordinarily, it's almost like you've basically hobbled the horse before it starts.
Yeah, and you've created a culture of instead of people going out and striving and working for themselves, you sort of suck the.
Well, they get into gang culture. Is the big deal, isn't it? They get into gang culture because they're looking for some kind of male bonding sort of opportunities.
Non-biological father substitutes are twice as likely to get involved in crime.
Yeah, that's it. OK, Josh, over to the Metro, and your template for fatherhood is being lionised by Tory ministers.
Yeah, get bonking for Britain. UK needs to shag more for country to survive. You're welcome, Britain. Yeah, so this is the MP for North East Hampshire. He's 37. What does he know about life? But they've sort of equating immigration. We've talked about it before, about this whole replacement... not replacement, sorry.
Great replacement.
You say the replacement.
La grande remplacement.
The replacement rate necessary.
The théorie de la grande remplacement.
The replacement rate is we've not been hitting as birth rates have been on the decline. Much greater in places like Italy, where they're going to... whole towns are going to be dying out in Sardinia in the next 10 years or so. Anyway, so they're sort of equating that and say, well, we don't need immigration if we are building our own babies, basically.
Would be less culturally disruptive, but of course you have to raise those children then, so that's economically disruptive, isn't it?
Well, yeah, this is why most politicians just want mass immigration. They don't want people having kids. Like Rishi Sunak, for example, is a classic person, because if you have the kids born and raised here, you've got to pay for all the healthcare, you've got to pay to educate them, you've got to pay, and also they're going to be quite entitled kids. They're not going to be working until they're like 25, and then they're going to be working in PR or something. So you need somebody to come in and get their hands dirty. So they just want to import fully grown workers.
And that'll get through the next 5 years, the next electoral cycle.
But yeah, I think you described it as throwing kindling on a fire, which is quite a good.
Exactly, and it's not. I mean, this country is in trouble. There are other countries, as you say, that are worse. Italy is, and the Mediterranean countries, which we still, I think, have in our heads a prejudice or a preconception that these places are enormously fecund. Yeah, they have massive parties under olive trees with loads of children running around.
They're not working.
And then you've got places like South Korea and Singapore, the absolutely kind of the white heat of economic activity in the Pacific Rim. The fertility level is below 1, like less than half of
because they're working too hard.
Yeah, exactly. And it just sucks in immigrants, mainly from India there, and they go straight to work in tech, and then they just expire.
But do we need more people? I mean, everybody says we need more people, but what about increasing productivity? I think the easy access of cheap labour caused by basically open borders means that we're not investing in things that would improve our productivity.
I think everyone is waiting for automation to take over at this point, aren't they? And then we can introduce the virus that sorts out the problem.
I think we can
have some border control.
Just making people work longer.
Yeah, like hours or years?
Years.
Yeah. Independent now, Leo, and red flags around the red arrows.
That's right. So the red arrows are subject to the most intense scrutiny after a damning report, according to a minister. I mean, they were subject to a lot of scrutiny before as well, when up in the sky. It was captivating to watch. But yeah, across all of the UK's defence teams, this is after a report found women were plied with alcohol, treated like property, and harassed for sex. According to Defence Minister Andrew Morrison. So the red arrows, they fly really close in the sky without touching, but they can't do that.
They get a little bit handsy when they're on the ground.
Absolutely.
But we've seen Top Gun. We know it's a macho culture, isn't it? I mean, are these women pilots, or are they just kind of like
I think there was only one woman pilot. And,
okay.
most of the men. The report came out a few weeks ago, but I've never seen the red arrows, but I know some people they love. Well, I guess you're down on the coast. But
no, my dad is a huge aviation enthusiast.
I mean, how are they worthy investment of?
Well, I don't know how big they are now, but of course, what they were was demonstrating their skill with the training aircraft. They flew. They were called Gnats, and then I think Hawks, and they were training aircraft which would then be sold in quantities to Indonesia or whatever. So it was a commercial exercise to some extent. But they were it was kind of it's a little bit like the same relationship that Formula One has to then Renault selling making better cars on the road as well.
Yeah.
So I think there is an element of purpose to it, but I bet they are intolerably macho. Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be. You're flying this hulk of metal through the air.
Yeah, when you take huge risks, I will tell you something. On the few occasions when I've taken big risks, it often correlates with a certain amount of boorish behaviour shortly afterwards if you get away with it.
Is this an admission?
Yes, I suppose it is. Let's get it out there. It was years ago. Staying with sexual harassment news now, Josh, in The Guardian, but in a slightly less glamorous, high-stakes environment.
Yeah, this is the other end of the scale. Yeah. I've just flipped my 20th burger, darling. McDonald's harassment and bullying cases truly horrific, says the UK boss. That he's they're getting 1 or 2 complaints of sexual harassment a week. This McDonald's in this country has like about 1,500 outlets.
Yeah.
They employ 180,000 people. A huge percentage of that are mostly young people as well. So this is a big issue, but also it's a franchise system, so it's not like they own the actual. A lot of these restaurants, although he's admitted they are getting complaints from some of the restaurants that they do own. This is going before the Commons Business and Trade Committee. They said that this all kind of came out. There was a big report about it, and they've said that they've now got like an independent investigations unit looking into these things. I imagine it's a hard thing to deal with on that scale. But
well, you need a bit of, mate, don't you? It's got to be like built into the culture. I remember I worked at McDonald's for about 3 weeks in 1984 when I was a student in Southampton, and the main prejudice there was against students. It was very much an us and them system there. And
they know that you would go on to...
Exactly. I was like, well, what are you studying? Law. How are you? Well, in the meantime, put this bin liner on your fist and go and unblock the lavatories.
That's good. I think every law student should do that.
Yeah, totally. Sports news now, Leo, in the Daily Mail. More trouble with trans competitors in the pool.
Yeah, so this is a pool player, Lynn Pinch's brother. She hasn't pinched her brother. She's called Lynn Pinch's. Her brother has praised her for taking a stand after she refused to play a transgender opponent in the final of this pool tournament, and says she feels it's so unfair to compete against a trans woman. So we've seen this in other sports, obviously combat sports, and physical sports where it's swimming or running or whatever, cycling as well. Transgender women, vastly outcompete. I mean, they can just lift more weights, they're stronger and all the rest of it. It's ridiculous. I mean, pool is less of a sort of physical sport, but still, I mean, I guess the transgender players might have more experience of handling balls.
I wonder whether, I don't know, she doesn't say that's very good, sorry, I stepped on that. I wonder whether she just is a matter of principle, whether she just,
I actually think, I saw the clip, and people actually were clapping when it was quite dramatic. She kind of just went and whispered in the ear of the referee or whatever, umpire, and then just kind of walked off and left this trans woman baffled. I thought it was a very brave thing for her to do. I'm not sure but my point is there was a massive height advantage of the
that
trans
does
woman.
matter. Yeah.
Obviously, as a man, their brain would work better.
We've got time to squeeze one more in before Josh gets cancelled. 3 down, 1 to go. After the break, Trump is hemorrhaging dollars. Pink is coming up on Pros, and Ms. Marvel is no Marvel. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified on playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back for the final section on headliners. So The Guardian now, Josh, and whatever Donald Trump's chances of winning back the presidency are, his Midas touch has not deserted him in business matters.
Trump's Truth Social platform has lost $73 million since launch, filing shows. Now, that's not necessarily unusual. It does cost millions and millions of dollars to launch these massive platforms.
And this one's just about to get really successful.
Yeah, it's just going to take off. I mean, I've got 4 followers. That's my Twitter. But yeah, they made 1.4 million, 2.3 million, or whatever. It seems like they're trying to keep it going by doing a merger, and that's why they've released these figures. They've had to release them to allow this merger to go ahead. But there's no. But then if the merger doesn't go ahead,
and unlike Mar-a-Lago, he can't really overvalue this one by orders of magnitude. I mean, to be fair to him, my sense was that he set this up when he was thrown off Twitter, mainly as a sort of a channel for his own propaganda. And if he wins the presidency next year, it will have been worth it, won't it? I suppose, in terms of what he would otherwise have spent on advertising.
Yeah, and I think the fact that Elon Musk bought Twitter and removed the sort of left-wing bias and censorship from it, really sort of ruined the business case for Getter and Truth Social. And he's lost money, but you can't put a price on truth.
No, that's true.
So,
you can. He also, Musk actually offered him, he's reopened his account, and Trump refuses to use it, doesn't he? Because he's trying to stay with this one. So there is a little bit of a... he's stretched over an abyss. Never mind. Back to the Mail for news that Pink wants to be the new Dolly Parton.
Yeah, so Pink, who's a singer, pop singer, is set to hand out 2,000 copies of banned books at her Miami concerts. I mean, you might think, oh, this is great. What is it, like 1984? Is it books like that? And it's like, no, they're actually just books that have been banned from libraries and schools because they feature sexualised images. And this was, I mean, some of these, you think, oh, no, this is just some reactionary right-wing bigots, taking offence at some depictions of, maybe non-binary characters or homosexual characters. It's like, no, this is like absolute absolute pornographic, like drawings and depictions, and a lot of it is, you know, sort of funneling into paedophilia.
Oh, I thought funneling was some practice I hadn't heard of. Yeah. They have funneling, you can see it.
I think if I used funneling in that sense, it would be an Ofcom violation. But yes, so she's
short on lube.
And Pink, obviously, being a sort of celebrity, she's got non-binary kids.
She does seem to have misgrasped the nature of it. I think there are some books which are not being made available to like 7-year-olds. There are other books that are just no longer on the curriculum, which, you know what I mean? There's a lot of different kind of gradations of banning.
Well, I think if you're going to criticise the bill, and I agree with you, some of the books that were included as part of this sort of permutation of woke ideology were disgusting and borderline pornographic. But certainly in Florida, where this concert's going on and where she's talking about doing this, there's an argument that they have sort of thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Right. There are books, and the 4 books that they are going to be giving out don't seem like terrible books. And you know,
Mockingbird is in there, right?
Yeah, Beloved by Toni Morrison. You know,
Best of Readers' Wives.
The Family book, which is just a children's book that has all the different types of families, including a gay couple. So what? So the books that they've given examples don't seem to be such a big deal. But you're right. This bill is absolutely massively missold as this like don't say gay bill because of course they're trying to sort of make it into this homophobic thing as opposed to actually let's not sexualize our children.
Yeah, it is true as well. I must admit that, you know, a number of books of the 20th century that were banned initially, like Ulysses and Last Exit to Brooklyn and even D.H. Lawrence, you know, have now become seen as classics of literature. So, you know, maybe Pink will be on the right side of history. Oh, dear. Daily Mail now, Josh. This was not mentioned by JFK, the prospects for fathering alien species in the race for space.
Human couples could give birth to alien babies as scientists work to pioneer sex in space, but gravity and radiation pose serious risks. We sort of covered this because they took rats up, they took like fetuses up, and they checked their development because outside of the Earth's atmosphere, there's going to be radiation, and they've proved that rats' sperm is fine.
Rat sperm is fine, so let's use that then. That's fine.
Exactly. I guess they're talking about now taking it to the next level, which is delivering a fetus to birth.
Oh, yeah.
And that's going to be the next step of it, because, of course, if we do need to go to another planet, that's something that we're going to have to
I like the way you frame that, the scientists having that conversation with the rat. So are you ready to move this to the next level?
Essentially.
Pick it up a step.
So, obviously, when they mean alien births, they're talking still human beings.
But outside of the normal jurisdiction. So the Times now, Leo, I have to say, perhaps the most disingenuous headline of the night.
So it says, death of the superhero. Marvel's new film has lowest opening ever. So it's suffered this box office collapse, and Marvel have dominated Hollywood for more than a decade. And this film, it's also had mediocre reviews. It made just $47 million over its opening weekend in North America, and it cost, like, I think, $220 million to make. And the previous lowest Marvel film was The Incredible Hulk, which made $55 million. However,
that was years before
2008. But this film, although it's made no money, it's going to get a great ESG score. Oh my God! So it's all women, it's diverse, it's got the first black woman director. So, you know, they're ticking all the boxes there. So, I mean, does money really matter?
Well, that's what I mean about the disingenuous headline, because the paper is suggesting, is this the end of the whole superhero run? But I think it's rather, this is like the all-female Ghostbusters.
Well,
These things, you know.
No, there was a thing a few weeks ago. Basically, they are in crisis. They are absolutely losing huge amounts of money with the Disney Plus service as well. They've been underperforming. I am like an insane geek of Marvel, and so I go take the kids every single opening weekend. We haven't been to like the last 2 or 3, because the quality has just absolutely dropped off. We've given up on Loki and all these.
It's like South Park say, they've just made it. They're making it lame and just shoving in all this pointless messaging and all this like unnecessary, just crowbarring in diversity.
And also it's bad storytelling, which is.
And I think, to be honest, the last few I saw, I mean, I found the whole end game, you know, it was very complicated, it was very heavy, but the humour got kind of leaden, I felt. Do you know what I mean? That was the thing. I think bringing good writers for that, you know, and you might lift it back up again.
That's also that diversity issues as well.
Yeah, well, that's our tip for MCU. I'm sure they'll take that on board. The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. We have the Daily Mail We had a deal and you broke it, Suella tells PM. Plus, story about Manilows for Christmas. iNews, revenge served hot and inflation falls. Mirror, Tories are revolting and fans fury at Ant and Dec over Farage. The Times, PM lied to me and betrayed Britain and a low-sugar treat guide. The Express, war is declared, battle come down. Suella accuses Rishi of betraying the nation. And finally, the Daily Star, Tories in a Tiz handbag. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Josh Howie and Leo Kearse. We're back at 11 p.m. tomorrow with some other people. I've done my two for the week, and I'll be back again this time next week. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, sleep tight. See you again soon. Good night.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And a very good evening to one and all. Yes, it's 7 o'clock. It's time for Farage here on GB News. But you've probably heard he's down in the jungle in Australia. He's not here. Unbelievably, we've had 2 days of political dynamite. And guess what? Nigel knows absolutely nothing. He doesn't know that Suella's been fired. He doesn't know that David Cameron has now been ennobled and is the Foreign Secretary, let alone knowing anything about the big news today, this bombshell letter from Suella Braverman that may well be the sinking of Rishi Sunak. We'll be obviously talking about that with some great guests. I've also secured some incredible new drone footage of some of the migrant camps outside Calais. You will not want to miss that, I can absolutely guarantee you. And of course, We need to understand what's going on in the jungle before the show starts. We'll be talking to Edwina Curry about what Nigel will be experiencing as we speak. All of that coming up, and Farage here on GB News.
Good evening, and the top story from the GB newsroom tonight. In an astonishing rebuke following her sacking as Home Secretary yesterday, Suella Braverman has today accused the Prime Minister of having manifestly and repeatedly failed to deliver on key government policies. Ms Braverman accused Rishi Sunak of a betrayal of his promise to do whatever it took to stop small boat crossings by failing to override human rights concerns about her Rwanda plan. She also urged the Prime Minister in her letter to change course urgently, telling him he'd led the Conservatives to record election defeats. Well, the Shadow Minister for International Development, Lisa Nandy, reacted like this.
Suella Braverman's letter is just the latest instalment in a Tory psychodrama that's been playing out over the last 13 years, holding the rest of the country to ransom while the Tories fight among themselves. This reshuffle was meant to be the moment when Rishi Sunak reset his leadership, when he signalled to the country that he stands for change. But with the return of David Cameron and the ongoing row with Suella Braverman, I think all he's served to do is just show that this is a Tory government that is out of ideas, out of energy.
Lisa Nandy speaking there. Now, Downing Street says the Prime Minister discussed the ongoing challenge faced by the Metropolitan Police in London in his debrief with Sir Mark Rowley after last Saturday's unrest near the Cenotaph. Number 10 says Rishi Sunak stressed the vital importance of pursuing both Hamas supporters and those responsible for violent scenes near the War Memorial on Armistice Day. The Commissioner had come under pressure from politicians after several weeks of demonstrations for a ceasefire in the escalating conflict between Israel and Hamas. Number 10 said the powers available to officers to deal with protests would be kept under review to see if they needed to be beefed up. Meanwhile, the UK has announced sanctions against 4 Hamas leaders and 2 of the terror group's financiers. It's one of David Cameron's first moves, actually, as Foreign Secretary. They'll be made subject to travel bans, asset freezes and arms embargoes that prohibits the sale of weapons to any of those individuals. And the Business and Trade Secretary is in Florida today to boost trade and